Hello and welcome to London Real. My name is Brian Rose. I'm here, as usual, with Mr. Nick Gabriel, and joining us today is Mr. Daniel Livingstone, who is an economist who works for the government.
As an advisor.
And just to give you a really weird background, I met Daniel in a comedy course that we took about a year ago, where we all, after the course was over, got up and did 5 minutes of stand-up comedy. And you might find this hard to believe, but Daniel was funnier than me.
Well, I mean, I didn't know anyone could be funnier than you.
Very modest.
Well,
I had a really hard night that night. I mean, my classmates were really cool. They're like, "Oh, it was a lousy crowd, Brian." Mm-hmm. And sometimes the crowds are lousy because people bring their friends and family. But man, I really bombed.
Well, you were up first, so you warmed it up for the rest of us.
I think it started off wrong when I got up there and I got up to the front and I said, "Hello, I'm Brian Rose, United States of America," and it was like silence. And afterwards, they hated me.
Well, yeah, you were preaching to a fundamentally left-wing audience, so they were going to hear the United States of America and think of negative things and react rather coolly to it.
Well, the thing they taught us in the comedy course is that you have to address what people think about you in the first minute, or you won't go anywhere. So I had to address the fact I was an American. We had a girl with short hair in the class who looked like a lesbian. God bless her. And if she didn't address that in the first minute, then people were like, okay, well, what's going on with her?
Yeah,
did you address the fact that you're extremely good looking?
That obviously spoke for itself, didn't it?
How about you, Daniel? How did you have to kind of address that? Because you come across as I don't know how I would describe you. I would describe you as a backbencher in the Tory party, although you probably will hate me for that.
Yes, I probably will, actually, yes.
Did you have to how did you address your first minute of who you are when you were stand-up?
Oh, never apologise, never explain. That's my philosophy, so I didn't address it.
Yeah, you didn't, did you?
I think I just got away with it, that's all.
Mm.
And I was very lucky because after about 10 or 15 seconds, I managed to get the first punchline in, which was essentially just like half the human race, and that got an instant laugh, which is ironic given the audience being a little bit touchy-feely. But you can always say something like, there were too many people in London, they get in the way, they're like a pack of vermin and that sort of thing, there's too many of them and perhaps half of them could be killed, and that will get a laugh from anyone.
Yeah, you were doing a really good rant. You were saying something like, I think they should be culled or something.
Everybody loves rants.
But they love that. Yeah, you did quite well that night.
Man, speaking of stand-up comedy, you know what I've noticed lately? I don't know if it's always been this way or if I've just only become aware of it, but when you're walking in the tube, every second poster is for a stand-up comedian. Have you noticed that? It's weird.
For DVDs or for live performances,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
What's
true.
that about? Are people just getting more open to that, or?
I think it's popular, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think people need cheering up on the first hand, but also I don't think that...
Could be recession-proof.
Possibly. I just think people still have spare time and they don't know what to do with it and they can't think of what to do, so let's go and see some comedy.
When was the last time you paid for comedy?
Well, I'm not paying for it now, so...
And you don't do comedy shows?
Dude, I dig comedy. I mean, I haven't been to any live stuff, but I'll watch stuff on YouTube. And Russell Peters is a favorite of mine.
Okay.
Have you watched him?
I know him, but I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. I think I've heard
Dave
his stuff.
Chappelle as well. God,
yeah, he's pretty funny.
He's one of the funniest.
Louis C.K. as well. I know your brother likes.
YouTube's quite cheap, I must admit.
Yeah, YouTube is the way to go. You know, when I told Nick I was doing this course, Nick was like, "Brian, I could never do that." And I was like, "Okay, Nick, you've gotten to a ring and beaten guys up in front of thousands of people, but you wouldn't get up on a stage."
And got beaten up.
But explain that to me. Well, why wouldn't you go up on stage for 5 minutes?
Man, I don't think I said that. I just didn't I say how I was really impressed.
Maybe
with
you were impressed, but I was just
mean,
like, you should do it, and you're like, I don't know.
Did you see the DVD afterwards?
Didn't I like to see that though?
I'm on YouTube. I had a second gig afterwards, which was much better. But anyways,
one you keep secret.
No, that's up there as well. But would you ever do it?
Yeah, look, dude. I mean, I'll try anything once, right? Well, to a point, but yeah, I'll do that one day.
Get up for 5 minutes and try to make people laugh.
Why not?
Okay.
I mean, we try to make people laugh for an hour each week, right?
Is that what we're doing? No, I found the course, I don't know about you, but we were in a room together for 3 hours with about 12 people that we didn't know who we were. And our teacher named Keith, who everyone has mixed reactions on. At the end of the day, you can say bad things.
He was a knob.
You could say a lot of bad things about Keith, but he did get almost everyone through the course and on stage.
Was he funny at least?
Depends on your definition of funny.
Honestly, no. Well, I think your buddy Dave explained it well. We had a comedy instructor who for 6 weeks didn't tell a joke, it didn't make us laugh. And did he say anything to us?
Not really. All he did was tell us to have a good attitude. He was actually like a professional teacher. You know, it was,
You would think he'd be cracking jokes left and right, but he wasn't.
How many of these dudes that were in your course went on to become like professional stand-up comedians?
I know there was one. Well,
there was one who already was a professional stand-up comedian, but he wasn't funny, at least not intentionally. Yeah.
Okay.
He'd failed to crack the Polish sitcom market. I think he was Polish in origin.
We had an interesting half English, half Polish guy. A shout out to him. And then we had another guy named Matt O'Brien, and we had a professional comedian come in and talk to us one class. And he said, "You're not a comedian until you do 100 gigs." And this guy in the course named Matt O'Brien, he was like flipped his switch, and he's like, "I'm doing 100 gigs."
Yeah.
So last time I checked, he's at like 70 something, and he just went out like that's 3 times a week. I mean, you go to these pubs on a Monday night
until we do 100 shows, right?
Yeah, maybe you're right. It's going to be 2 years.
One of these hyper-competitive types.
Yeah.
So some guys went on to do it, but it's a hard racket, and you're doing it for free. And I mean, when I did my first gig outside of the school, I waited 3 hours on a Monday night in a pub room downstairs until I maybe was going to get to go up at 11 for 5 minutes.
Where was this pub?
It was somewhere in like EC something or other. I don't know. But it was awesome 5 minutes.
Well, and what was the audience like?
Dave was there. There was a few of the people from our class that were there. I don't know. What I learned is I have to America bash. The Brits love America bashing. So I would get up as an American and I would just start slamming America, and they loved it. Yeah. Can't get enough.
That's interesting.
Can you explain that?
Yes, that's your form of self-apology.
You know what I love is Joe Rogan when he did you ever see that he was doing one stand-up thing and some chick starts to heckle him and he just shreds her. I think she probably ran out of the crowd crying.
He's one of the best when it comes to hecklers. He just shuts them down. Yeah. And we all were kind of ready for it, and we all tried to have a few things in our back pocket, but we just had some dumb one-liners to be ready. Oh, is it the first time? Is this your first beer? Something stupid like that.
Yeah, I got a heckler as well.
You did?
Yeah.
At the night.
Yeah, well, I was trying to explain why travelling by train in London's awful. So I asked the crowd, does anybody actually like travelling by train? And somebody said yes. So I just said, well, you're clearly mentally ill. I did shut them up. Well, the ensuing laugh from the audience shut them up, so they got drowned out.
See? He's got it. Their natural talent.
Yeah, maybe I've thought about this before, like the ability to be funny and to make people laugh and wit in general. I wonder if it's just a highly specialized form of intelligence. Like it's just reaction speed in your brain, how quickly you can process language or something happening and find the humor in it and then express it. I mean, what would you guys say to that?
On an impromptu basis. That's true.
Yeah, that sounds plausible, but you've got to be confident, and your rhetoric's got to be pretty free-flowing.
And on that note, this week's show is sponsored by
yes, and you can
New
use
Mood oil.
That's New Mood.
nootropics and artificial stimulants and all that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, that's probably why I didn't do very good in comedy course, because I wasn't on Alpha Brain.
Exactly.
Which is our sponsor, and Daniel's just taken some.
Well, my secret was for about 10 minutes before, I was doing breathing exercises, kind of yogic breathing exercises.
You were?
Wow.
Yeah, which basically...
were you drinking before, by the way?
No.
I think you and me were the only ones that weren't drinking. Everyone else started knocking them back for a good hour before.
Yeah, well, that's because they were nervous, and it was only going to make them more nervous. So by the time they got on, they'd be saying, oh my God, I might be drunk, I won't know what to say. Oh no, I'm nervous.
I don't know. Do you think
I don't think it helped them.
Do you think a couple of drinks would have taken the edge off? I notice a couple of drinks always take the edge off me in anything.
But you're performing and you're trying to remember 5 minutes of your material, and I don't know.
Rogan's always stoned when he goes on stage, right?
He is, and he has a beer as well. He's stoned when he does everything.
I've never met this Rogan, but he might be very good. So he might just be able to automatically get into a kind of flow thing where his conscious mind is switched off.
I think that's
so when your conscious mind gets in the way of doing something, then you're more than likely be trying to remember what you're doing. You're not going to do it half as well or even well at all. Mm-hmm. So if you get onto stage where you've done some breathing exercises and you just don't think, you just know you know your lines and all that sort of thing. I mean, I only actually practiced them twice. I hardly knew what I was going to say by the time I got up there. I was just confident and had faith, if that's not too extreme a thing to say, that I'd get through it, and it worked. And I got into the flow situation within the first 5 minutes, because I got the first laugh in the first 10 seconds, and that was it. And the heckler actually helped.
It did.
The heckler was a instrument for getting an even bigger laugh.
Yeah, it's interesting that
so
way.
So when you mentioned that flow state, I read a book, I think it was called The Flow State, and it was all about entering into that state and ways to facilitate it. And the reason I read it was because I wanted to start entering that state when I was doing martial arts.
Yeah.
So fascinating to me that you mentioned wanting to get into that state with comedy. I know, Brian, can you identify any examples in your life of where you've entered into the flow state, or what you thought was a flow state?
I think since I started training in martial arts with you, I started to notice my breathing now. And I just know now when I'm nervous, or even at that night at the comedy club, I just, first of all, stay sober, and then just really control my breathing, and just try to also convince myself that this is the least most difficult thing I've ever had to do.
Controlling your breathing effectively switches off your neocortex, which is the bit at the very top of your brain, so that if any fear or anything like that comes from deep in your unconscious through the stem part of your brain, then the amygdala, exactly, which is located in there, then your cerebral cortex won't magnify that with words, because once words are attached to a feeling, it becomes an emotion, and then it can dominate you if you're not careful. So you've got to prevent it from happening in the first place. So if you do your breathing exercises, if you do your meditation, you actually switch that bit of your brain off, you'll more than likely be in the flow state for basically as long as you can maintain it, as long as you can just focus on your breath and absolutely not worry about anything else. Absolutely not worry about anything else. So it's kind of like having faith. So a lot of people who pray get into this flow state, but they think that God's put them in there because of their faith, so they actually make an error. And then they start thinking about it and preaching to everyone else.
It sounds like we're talking to like a guru from India, not an economist trained at LSE who works for the government. Is there a disconnect here?
Well, yes and no.
Or am I just being stereotypical?
Well, I'll get onto that in a minute, I think. There's a disconnect in the sense that education teaches you, at least in the West, to think in a certain way.
What do you, if I were to just interrupt you there, on that same thread, there's the hypothesis, the dual brain hypothesis, which claims that the left side of the brain controls all verbal linguistic processes, and the right side controls all intuitive processes. And one of my favorite spiritual teachers, Osho, he says what happens in the modern West is that we take the child and we train his left brain to such a highly specialized degree that the right brain's abilities atrophy. Yeah. And eventually he becomes almost schizoid because he doesn't have access to that half of his being. And he says what meditation does is it's starting to engage the right brain again, or the right side of your brain again.
Yeah, it puts both hemispheres into balance.
Yeah. Do you believe?
I don't know. I'm not a neurologist, but it sounds very plausible. I mean, there's a lot you can say in favour of what Osho says, but there's a lot of other things about Osho that aren't too palatable or healthy, which I won't go into here.
Like what?
Some of his followers, some of his camps and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Basically, he preached non-ego, but he then had a cult following. And that's exactly the opposite of non-ego. So contradictions like that can very quickly arise.
You've done some study on. Did you meditate?
No, I've just read a book. It just, I think I believe it just qualifies me to talk.
Okay.
I don't know if everybody else believes that.
Sounds good. So you don't meditate?
I do, yeah. Or should I say I try to, but often in the morning I don't, because first thing I can think of is get that cup of coffee, get that caffeine fix, rush off to work. So my left brain, or in my case my right brain, because I'm left-handed, kicks into gear before I can stop it. So I actually need a kind of every so often a holiday so I can actually stop that process and start the meditation again and switch that bit of my brain off. Obviously, I need it at work during the day because I've got to think about things, do numbers, do computations, give advice on the best available evidence, and work out and calculate every single possibility and blah-de-blah-de-blah. But that overstimulation needs to be offset. And the only way of doing it is meditation, to actually switch that bit of the brain off and let the other hemisphere actually have a chance to speak. Or my whole being have a chance to breathe, if you want to use that kind of language.
Now, you talked about what you do during the week, and I mean, I just have to ask. So, what do you actually do for the government? What do people say when you say you worked for the government, and why do we need you working for the government? If you can give me a 2-minute or 3-minute.
Okay, sounds like an essay test or a job interview, but...
Well, what do you do?
Well, I'm an economic advisor, so I advise on what's good value, what's best value, what's likely to be good value, what's likely to be bad value. I mean, it's all really a matter of judgment, and it's a matter of relaying theology of economics as it currently stands or is currently accepted, and injecting it into government decision-making.
Wow. So
that the economic aspects of a decision can be taken into account. For example, if I used to work in rail, so I'd give advice on rail investment schemes. and that's often summarised by a single number. So I'd explain all the different numbers, benefit-cost ratios they call them, and give a view as to which is the best one.
And your information is used by the Prime Minister or by both parties to make economic decisions for the
It
country?
goes everywhere. It spreads throughout the government machine, and it
Okay.
informs decision-making in general.
Wow.
That's probably the best way of
What
putting it.
What if another economist has a different view, and he puts forth a different figure for like a budget decision? I mean, where does your input stand in the hierarchy of like all these different advisors, or how does it work with you?
Well, there were basically set sorts of rules for actually going about this. So the Treasury accepts a certain level of economic theology, which is basically the best available information on how the economy operates at this point in time. Mm-hmm. It's not to be seen as a absolute truth written in tablets of stone, although some people behave as if this is the case. So there's quite a lot of room for interpretation around the margins, mm-hmm. because I'm an economist and I offer advice doesn't mean I know everything. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want people to think that, otherwise they'd be asking for advice all the time. Mm-hmm. So if there's a disagreement, it can usually be resolved, but it usually doesn't get to that, mm-hmm. quite frankly.
Okay.
Because I'm right all the time. But
Does the government also use, is there an argument that they should use private contractors as opposed to the government public employees, or do you take those things into account? Because there's obviously lots of economists working in the city that might have conflicting views, but then again, maybe they're acting in their own interest to a certain extent. Do you see that?
Well, private contractors do act in their own interest.
Okay.
The only justification for using a private contractor is if they can do it cheaper than a set of government employees. Whether that means they're incentivised to do it more efficiently or come down on the price, mm-hmm. or whatever. It's a matter of then demonstrating that, and it's not always easy to do that because sometimes the indicators of what they're going to deliver, like, for example, if you try to get private contractors to deliver rail efficiency, how do you actually measure that? Okay, you can measure that in output per unit of cost, but you don't know what would happen otherwise if you had government employees doing it. Mm-hmm. So it's always going to be subjective, but it's going to be a well-informed subjective decision.
Mm-hmm. Are we heading to a recession? Is it all bad? You're always asking me this, right, Nick? Nick's like, what's going to happen, in my opinion? But,
yeah, it's just the ego's fear of the future.
Well said.
But anyway, I'd like to know, if you have any opinion.
Or how bad is it going to be? Or how bad is the European banking sector? Is the euro going to crush the sterling if it fails?
It depends on whether the Germans actually relent and allow money to be printed en masse and get over their psychological fear and what happened in 1923 repeating itself.
They have a horror.
It's a pretty well-founded fear.
They have a big fear of inflation because it was in the early 20s after the First World War.
Wheelbarrows full of money.
Wheelbarrows full of money. And if you have any savings, that gets killed, right, with any kind of inflation.
Yeah, but the Germans seem to see economics and the euro as some kind of Calvinist morality tale. So the idea is not to print money because somehow that's wrong, even if it is a mechanism for propping up the euro, even under the circumstances. And that's the essential rigidity in their position, which means that banks can't be quickly recapitalised. They don't want to give in on that. And this is quite possibly an example of decision-making or democracy even having its flaws. Because if everybody in Germany believes this Calvinistic morality tale, you'll get into debt, you deserve to pay it back, and you must go bankrupt and all that sort of thing. Then everybody goes bankrupt, including the person actually making that statement.
So it's all about confidence.
Well, I suppose that translates into confidence, yeah.
So maybe you can clarify something for me. It's my understanding from the various stuff I've read and been exposed up until this point that the global economy has got this bubble in it, or this diseased portion that basically just keeps being shuffled around through things like quantitative easing and things like that. And the expression I've heard used is that we're kicking the can down the road and that we have to pay the price sooner or later. I mean, do you think there's any truth to that, or is that just this Calvinistic erroneous view? Or
I would say it is the Calvinistic view, yeah. The bubble was basically caused by banks lending too much, and they did that because interest rates were kept low for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. The reason interest rates were kept low for a long period of time was China was artificially depressing its currency so it could export to the rest of the world, so it could keep its population in work. So instead of them...
Which it's still doing.
Which it's still doing. So instead of them basically killing off the Communist Party and having a revolution, they worked hard for not very much, and the currency value was kept low. Now, China then accumulated a huge surplus of money, and the Western countries accumulated a deficit. Now, obsessive free market economists and those of the so-called Austrian school, which basically does not believe in quantitative easing and thinks that high interest rates are usually a good thing in order to allocate capital effectively. This is where they're wrong. The Chinese basically recycled that money back to the West, and it went back into banks, so they could do even more lending. But Western central banks had to, all of them had inflation targets, but this extra money did not manifest itself, particularly in Britain, as higher inflation. And there were two reasons for this. One, the cost of Chinese goods didn't increase because the renminbi, or whatever the hell they call it, didn't increase in value against sterling. Well, I don't know what the hell it's called, the renminbi, the dong.
Renminbi, right?
No, the dong is the Vietnamese currency. That always gets a snigger out of me.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Chinese, their interest, they've got 1.1 billion people they don't want to revolt. And so the economies are very rich on the coastal regions.
Yeah.
And on the interior, they're not. And so they need everybody to keep working. Yeah. So they loan money for projects, not even worried about return on capital.
Yeah,
they just want to keep people working.
I mean, I was always worried about China taking over the world, and I always used to believe in the threat of Chinese imperialism. And then a friend of mine, big shout out to Dr. Khalil Habib.
We need to get him on the show.
He said to me, China is the biggest bubble waiting to burst. He was explaining how, I can't remember if it was directly or indirectly, but 30% of China's GDP comes from Walmart. It's attributed to Walmart in one way or another.
Comes from Walmart.
Say again?
How do you mean? You mean it goes through Walmart?
Yeah, well, it's.
This is the essence of the problem. So they recycled this money to the West. Interest rates remained low, particularly in Britain, where mortgage rates actually fed through into the inflation numbers. So as interest rates fall, inflation falls, and then interest rates go low and inflation falls further. Therefore, more irresponsible lending funded by China. When the bubble finally burst in 2008, the West was left with these huge debts, government debts, consumer debts, individuals, and essentially bank debts. But China could not pull the plug out and not object to the West lowering interest rates to zero and printing money, because otherwise it'd have a revolution on its hand. So it's basically put itself in a situation where, because it's wanted its population to work and not have a revolution, they are doomed to continue with that. Therefore, if the deficit is just simply inflated away and printed away, and if you're in a flexible exchange rate regime, i.e. sterling not being in the euro, then there is actually a chance of getting a free ride off the rest of the world economy. Yeah. That's why quantitative easing is a good idea, and that's why it's not exactly the same as the Calvinistic morality tale, not only beloved of Germans and the Austrian schools, but also it's a deep strain in conservative common sense thinking. John Maynard Keynes himself said in the 1930s that we don't want granny wisdom to rule economic decision making.
What does that mean?
Right. What he meant was
better save, and
what he meant was in a recession or a depression, it's better for the government to spend money. He said go into debt, but going into debt and quantitative easing in the current context is a similar thing. A granny would say, yes, but it's like a household, isn't it? You cut your cloth to suit your needs and make you amend, all this kind of thing. Well, that might be right for an individual, but on a group scale, it's absolutely wrong.
So you disagree with the austerity measures being imposed on economies like Greece right now?
They're only necessary to prop up the euro and to also assuage the German Calvinistic sensibility. So
the Germans are playing a poker hand to a certain extent, though, as well. I mean, they almost have to bluff every week to try to see if these individual countries' economies are going to get their act together, right? Because the Greeks you need to show a little bit of austerity because they've been on this 50-year-long party, right, of spend.
Yeah, I know. And they say, I think the Germans need to bail them out to some extent, but they don't want to do it too much. Say, you will not drink your espressos and you will pay us back the money.
I've always wondered what would happen if...
The German impressions are free.
Absolutely.
What do you think would happen if, starting tomorrow, I mean, it's a hypothetical situation that will never take place, but everything was just reset back to zero.
It's an interesting point. Erase the debt, erase assets,
erase
everything?
third world debt to the first world, erase everyone's credit card debt, erase everything. Just start from zero. What do you think would
I gotta
happen?
hear this answer. That's the premise of Fight Club at the end when you're breaking all the buildings
exactly.
out.
Well, probably would be inflation. I wouldn't like to forecast how much. I don't know, it might be a good idea. It's impossible to say what would happen if you did that. It's a good one, though. I quite like it.
The thing that blows my mind about money is, I've done a very... I've looked into it like on a very shallow level, but from what I can understand, it's just the whole global economy is just all built on a house of cards, like fractional reserve banking. Like, for example, when you hear about these numbers, like Greece owes, 8 billion or 8 trillion, whatever it is. All these things are just numbers sitting on a piece of silicon somewhere. It's not like actual...
Well, they're not even sitting on a piece of silicon. They're actually the dynamic properties of communication between bits of silicon. So they don't actually exist in spot terms.
But that money was spent. They did spend 80 billion on train tracks up into the rocks and on all these other things.
There's just agreement that this amount exists as an amount of money which reflects the net worth of a country or an organisation.
And it's not actual.
Temporary.
It's not an actual physical. I mean, these countries don't have huge vaults that are like piled high with dollars or whatever it is. It's just an abstraction. It's a complete abstraction. Is that correct?
Well, the concept of money is an abstraction. It's just something that emerges from the human brain as a result of exchange, which is what human societies have done since the dawn of agriculture. So it's hardly surprising that money is an abstraction. It, in fact, always has been. It's just in the old days, it was an abstraction related to the fact that people wanted to accumulate gold. And that itself is just something that's contingent on human sensibilities at a particular historical period. So it always has been. It's just that the abstractions are perhaps a little bit bigger these days.
Well, or finer. A book I read, I think I mentioned this to you, Brian, once. And this guy was explaining how money is becoming a progressively finer form of energy. Originally it was cattle, like that's how people traded. They bartered, or they held their wealth in cattle, and then it was seashells or blocks of salt, and then it was coins, and then it was paper money, and now it's like electronic money. It's becoming a finer and finer form of energy, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I always avoid arguments by metaphor and analogy.
That's smart.
That reminds me of Nate.
I was just thinking of something. If I just took the tour of the Bank of England has a museum, and you can go in there and you can walk through and learn about the creation of the Bank of England and how it started off with the gold standard, and you can learn all about how it moved off of that. It's really interesting. I encourage you to go. But they talk about, I never knew that the British pound was a pound of silver, was what it originally was based on. And then you can see how the Bank of England was actually created. It was really, Bank of England, I think, was originally created to fund a war against France.
It
was like a small limited partnership.
I watched a documentary on that.
1690. It was
1694. Yeah.
It's I mean, maybe I don't know. Maybe I worked in finance. I think it's interesting, but I thought it fascinating.
Yeah, it was the Rockefellers, the Oppenheimers, or one of those famous families that did that created that financed that war, right? Or who did that? What you just mentioned about
the war against France.
Yeah,
this was the English.
Oh no, this was in the end of the 17th century.
All right.
Yeah, so 1690s or
no,
something.
you're talking. I think you're talking about the Napoleonic Wars.
Okay, no, there was some. I watched some documentary, and there was some family.
Not sure about the Rockefellers. Now I think that was a little bit later.
They were in the 19th century or the 20th century in the States, right? The Rockefellers.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the rich families in the state. I mean, J.P. Morgan had bailed out the U.S. government at one point in the early 1900s, I think it was.
Yeah, but in those days, the U.S. government hardly borrowed anything.
That's probably true, and the families were. They were thieving capitalists.
In those days, everybody was self-sufficient, so there was none of this sort of state intervention or state income tax or the state guaranteeing equality or anything like that. So in those days, the state didn't spend as much. I'm not saying I'm against these things, by the way. I'm just describing it.
Well, what do you say to the common guy on the street when you're? I ask a lot of the people I meet. I'm like, are you going to vote and this and that? And they're going to say, this stuff doesn't matter to me. I don't need to know about the sterling. I don't need to know about Calvinist policies. What's the point of all this? What do you tell them? Do they need to know what's going on right now?
I don't know. I rarely engage in such conversation with such people.
Well, if you did, what would you say?
Hypothetically?
I'd probably say you have a point.
It's not a metaphor.
You don't need to understand everything, and too much information can be very, very bad for you.
Yeah, that's so true. You can. There was one philosopher who read himself insane.
Really?
Yeah,
Was that Schopenhauer?
I think it was. Yeah, like the dude just. Can you
He
imagine?
didn't have to read very much to get that far.
So let's take.
Although he did have a point. He ended up in a flat on his own, disavowing all relations with women and just with his dog for company.
Perfect.
I'll drink to that.
I want to join him.
Well, he took his views to their obvious conclusion. At least he was intellectually consistent, so he obeyed his intellectual conscience pretty much automatically.
Let's flip the
German
switch
as well,
and
so-
Flip it.
a little bird told me that
Yeah.
you may or may not have taken ayahuasca.
I wouldn't use the word taken. I have been to an ayahuasca retreat, yeah.
Okay, could you tell us a little bit about that? In fact, could you tell us a lot about that?
I'll describe some of it. Some of it's actually beyond description.
Okay.
Basically, the idea of the retreat, an ayahuasca retreat, is that you go and you take the ayahuasca and you see things from a different perspective. In a sense, it helps open up your left brain, or in my case, my right brain.
Okay.
I'm left-handed. And for a while, you just see everything differently. But the main reason I did it was it looked to be a very good cure for all sorts of bad habits like smoking, drinking, and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it absolutely does stop addictions. Absolutely does.
Wow.
For quite a long period of time. I'm not quite sure how it does it. You see the world differently through the whole process. And as a result of seeing the world differently, you're kind of more creative, but without having to think. A bit like meditation, though I think it's probably best if you do the two of them in conjunction. What the Native Americans say is that ayahuasca is actually a plant god or spirit god, and it speaks to you. So in a sense, what they're saying is it actually conveys information about the planet. I must admit, when I was taking it, I had this feeling that plants were the only intelligence on the planet, or the greatest one, but they were a collective intelligence. So it's all plants speaking. So it's not just one blade of grass or one ayahuasca vine. It's the whole lot of them.
It's like a hive mind.
A higher mind, you could put it
Oh,
that
no,
way,
a
yeah.
hive mind.
A hive mind, yep, that's exactly it, yeah. Something, a type of mind that goes beyond the human conception of mind. That is not the mind of an individual.
Is that like an anti-hive? Is that what you're saying? Like there's
Yeah,
like a collective
an
consciousness that goes beyond an
collective
individual?
consciousness, yeah.
Okay. Well, where were you when you did this?
Sussex, that's where it was.
Okay, so you did it in England.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And you said Native Americans, or is it did the Native Americans take it, or was it the Native South Americans? Was there some in Mexico, maybe?
By Americans, I mean the whole of America, not just the United
Americans.
States.
Fair enough. Okay.
And when did you do this?
February, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I recommend it to anyone.
Wow. Was it? People have told me that it can be incredibly scary.
Yeah, but I have such a boring life. I enjoy being scared.
Had you had any experience with anything like this before? I mean,
No.
is it you? Okay, so
Apart from when somebody slips some magic mushrooms into my food on my stag night, yeah.
Because some people say you should have
That's
some.
one way of seeing three-dimensional TV.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of the
Four-dimensional, actually.
Glass is free.
the guys say that you should experience some mushroom trips before you go to a DMT ayahuasca, because you should be a little bit familiar with a psychotic before you go for the 9 yards of ayahuasca.
I think they might have a point, but the use of the word psychotic is unfortunate, because a psychotic is somebody whose brain and whose ego is effectively compartmentalised and split into bits. So it actually implies that your brain would compartmentalise and you'd suffer psychotic episodes. That's not what happens.
Psychedelic was the
Psychedelic,
word, right?
sorry,
Yeah,
psychedelic.
yeah.
Psychedelic.
My mistake.
Well,
That's a big mistake, but my mistake.
but you have
Yeah.
to go along with the learning and the understanding. So what it kind of says is that most of what the human race does is silly and pointless. All of the economics, all of the politics, and all of the rushing around and having your first cappuccino and then your second and your third, and then doing whatever work it is, then rushing home and driving in your car and living for the weekend and consuming unsustainably the planet's resources if there was no tomorrow, and then perhaps every so often salving your conscience by voting green or recycling, or more likely in my case, ordering other people to recycle.
That's a great little diatribe there.
Maybe Daniel, maybe you could.
Don't get me started.
I'd love to see how you'd respond to. Brian and I were chatting about something on another episode of London Real. We kind of have a different perspective on whether or not the planet's running out of resources. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think this current level of consumption and production is sustainable, or do you think we're pretty much showing the seeds of our own destruction?
Well, nothing lasts forever, does it? No species in the past have lasted forever. Quite a lot of societies have died out, and if you really agree with what Jared Diamond says, it's often because they've consumed their own resources. So, I would generally go along with that.
Okay. Who is Jared Diamond?
He's an anthropologist. I can't remember the name of the book, but he basically looked at past extinctions of various societies like the Aztecs and the Incas. Okay, in that case, there was a complication of the Spanish arriving, but other ones as well. And he marshalled some compelling evidence to suggest that they basically ran out of resources because they consumed them too much, they'd reproduced too much, there were too many of them, and then in a localised setting, their environmental footprint was so great that they couldn't. They basically couldn't grow enough food to eat, so they started arguing with each other, and war came to them as a sign of resource depletion.
Well, I mean, that's what's happening with oil, pretty much.
Pretty much analogous, yeah.
Yeah, I guess to a certain extent, yeah. Everyone protects that resource.
But it's a matter of when this is going to happen. Like 250 years ago, or whatever it was, Malthus said that people would starve en masse because eventually the capacity of agriculture to feed a growing world population would be exceeded by that population's needs.
Hasn't happened so far. Right?
It hasn't happened so far, but the graph he produced, he didn't bother labelling the axes, so we don't know when.
Yeah.
Of course, the population is considered as going to be tapering off in the next 50 years, around 9 billion, which
I didn't know
it can
that.
be.
That's right,
I read that the other day, and I was surprised. I thought like it just carried it.
You see Western Europe, it's not even sustaining itself at this point as far as reproduction. But I just want to get a few more details on what happened in Sussex. As far as how long did it take you? Did you do it in a group setting?
No, I did it on my own. I did it in a ceremony. I did it with I suppose what you call a specialist.
Is it shaman?
She's a shaman, yes.
Okay.
Queen Mother, that's what she called herself. That's what she was to be addressed by.
Queen Mother.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds ego gone rampant. If you ask.
No. That's a technical name. So
it is.
It seems like there'd be no ego allowed in the room for Ayahuasca.
Well, she's Ghanaian in origin.
Okay.
Although when I spoke to her on the phone, I thought she was English. She had such a well-cut accent. Mm-hmm. When I met her, I couldn't put two and two together immediately to realise it was the same person. But she then explained where it came from. It came from her culture. In the case of Boga, not Ayahuasca, that's from South America.
Boga, yeah.
Boga's kind of a different version, but often stronger.
I've heard, you might find this interesting, Brian, that Boga is it's a psychedelic similar in action to DMT, but apparently it's even stronger. And apparently when a heroin addict is serious about quitting heroin, he takes Iboga because what it does is it's equivalent to 5 years worth of intensive psychotherapy. It takes you to the root of the addiction, the disease in your mind that causes you to destroy yourself through heroin. And once that's been illuminated to you, you're free of it.
And you'll feel very, very empty afterwards as well.
Really?
For a period of time.
Like weeks?
Well, after the ayahuasca, I was empty for weeks.
Why did she give you ayahuasca instead of Iboga?
I think it's because I only went because I thought it was a detox retreat. I didn't realise about the ayahuasca bit, so I should have prepared. Okay. And she told me about it, so I said, I'll give it a go. Wow. So I discovered it entirely by accident.
Respect to you for having the courage to do that. I wouldn't do something like that.
And how long? So it was a weekend?
Well, never taking a risk is taking a risk itself, as I heard earlier.
Every time I try to explain that to someone who doesn't take risks, they look at me like they don't know what I'm talking about.
That is the riskiest of all behavior, is to stay in your little shell.
It is, and it's impossible to try to explain to someone, I think. So you went alone for a weekend or a week?
It was 5 days.
Okay, and did you just take the ayahuasca once?
Yeah, once. It was one ceremony.
Did you purge at all, or did you puke?
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah.
Where were you? Were you in a room?
Yep, with a bucket.
Okay, and just her?
Yep.
How long were you there for?
Doing the vomiting, it was a few hours.
Wow.
But that's so it sort of takes better. I was just prepared to try it, open to everything, and it was very good. And I'm going again as well.
Well,
really?
When are you going in?
Sometime next year.
Okay. Brian and I are going to the Amazon next year to do it at the end of next year.
Well, actually, you could do it in Sussex if you want.
Yeah, I just want the authentic experience,
Some people say you should go to the jungle and do that. Do everything there.
you should go if you want yourself purged, you want the benefits. The authentic experience is probably not the right way of looking at it.
Why do you say that?
It's not there to be an experience. It's there as part of a process of personal growth. If you commodify it and call it an experience, you're treating it just like another consumption good. And that is the mentality, which is part of the problem. So the ayahuasca subverts all that. So all of these ideas from culture, which have been around for thousands of years and are reaching their apotheosis now in the high mass consumption, or not given the recession, basically subverted by the ayahuasca, so you can see the world without that. So if you actually start commodifying it and treat it as an experience, then you won't get most of the benefits.
See, I don't look at it that way. The way I see it is that we could get on a train and go to Sussex, and and take ayahuasca, and I'm pretty certain that we'd learn a lot and there'd be a lot of personal growth. But by embarking on the journey, going to the place where this plant is from, taking ourselves out of the comfort zone.
The journey is in your mind. It's not in a location on the planet.
That's interesting.
That's
an interesting counter argument to that.
Yeah.
I mean,
although taking the physical journey could augment the mental journey.
It probably it could augment the journey, yeah. But it's actually the whole point of it is the internalized experience, and in the setting of a retreat where you're taken through everything, you get all of that anyway. You could be in Antarctica, you could be in Sussex, you could be in Northamptonshire, or you could be in the jungles of Peru or whatever. That bit's irrelevant. It's actually how you respond to the treatment, and actually treatment's even the wrong word as well. Ceremony is the word.
Ceremony.
Yeah.
But if the ceremony without the ayahuasca would just be a ceremony. So is it more than a ceremony?
Yes, but you can get the ayahuasca in Sussex, that's the point.
Okay, I think I understand.
Why go to the jungles of the Amazon?
Just sounds cool.
Yeah, well, that's the point. You're the victim of all of this commodification, packaging, and the conversion of experience into a form of hardened reality. And that's, part of the problem of the problematic mindset that has led to the overconsumption of the planet's resources.
I think you have a point, Daniel, but I also think that if I was in the Amazon and walking through the jungle and looking at these vines and like communing with Mother Nature on that level, and I'd have a much greater respect for the plant, and I think there'd be a lot more sanctity to that ceremony. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's the way I look at it.
What people call nature is a little bit of a myth and a fabrication, because everything's nature. We're part of nature. This table's nature, this radio show is nature, all the buildings out there are nature. It's just that they don't look like a jungle, they don't look like an environment in which humans evolved, so it doesn't ring as many bells for them, so they don't relate to it in the same way. So,
would you say that there's a difference between nature and natural? Because...
Well, everything's natural, because the laws of nature, if you say they're the laws of physics, then everything's natural, so it's a meaningless distinction. A lot of distinctions are meaningless, they're just the product of a Platonic sort of mindset.
I definitely see
essences.
I see both of your points. I think when Nick talks about it as being an experience, when I think about it, I'm terrified, because I know we're not going down to Rio to go for a jiu-jitsu camp. I know we're going down to, in my opinion, explore the deep, dark innerness in myself.
Face the demons.
And that's what scares me. And I was just wondering.
You don't have to go to Peru to do that.
Okay. Were you scared? Did some things happen you didn't want to happen? Did you regret taking it during the ceremony?
No. Nothing happened that I didn't want to happen.
Okay.
There were some surprising and very strange things. Which
could you tell us some of those?
At one point, there was a tape recorder on, and I didn't want it on. And I just thought, turn it off, and it didn't work. And there was a washing machine on, and I thought, turn it off, and it didn't work. Then it didn't work the following day, and I thought, turn it back on again. And it turned itself back on. So some other level of consciousness was being accessed as a result of that.
Oh.
There was a tape recorder on, like recording your experience?
No.
Oh.
No, I can't prove it. I just know it happened to me.
Okay.
I know it sounds odd, but there are perhaps ever dimensions that are incomprehensible.
You know what
And it always
fascinates me
remains
is
What about the addiction thing as well? I just want to. You said that you went in. Or you went to a detox week.
Right, the addiction was just addiction to eating, in my case, very minor. Drinking too much coffee, smoking, eating bread, and this sort of thing.
Okay.
So these are just things I felt compelled to do. So you might as well call them addictions.
Mm-hmm.
There was a mental component and a physical component. What the ayahuasca did was, well, firstly, I was taken away from those. But then what the ayahuasca did was it made me see things differently, and it just simply took away those desires.
And when you noticed that when you got back, you were just you were thinking through before you were doing these same actions.
Well, it's more.
You just weren't even doing those actions.
I think thoughts happen. I just didn't think about doing these unhealthy practices.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's kind of like a computer, I suppose. So it's a Control-Alt-Delete button. Reset.
What do your friends say when you tell them about this? I'm guessing that none of your friends decided to do this after you told them about it.
A couple of them are very interested. The rest of them think I'm nuts. But there again, that category thought I was nuts before. So
man, I've
quite a lot of other
got to
people
be honest. Like, if I had met you at a dinner party or something and no one had mentioned the ayahuasca thing, I never in a million years would have thought that you're the kind of person who would do something like. Never in a million years. And you
Why
know
is
what?
that?
It shows the limitation of my own stereotyping mind. Like, that's what it is.
Also, I think when we think of ayahuasca, we always do think of it as a psychedelic when, in fact, maybe it's a ceremony. Maybe it's, as the way Daniel describes it, it's not.
Well, you
really.
you have to take it with under the tutelage of somebody who's a trained shaman.
Did she speak with you during the ceremony? Was it
Yeah,
very
she
important
did.
that she was there?
Yeah,
And you trusted her?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I had faith, and the faith was repaid.
Okay.
So yes, I do trust her. I still trust her.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow. And you're going back?
yeah.
Because in the Amazon, they think they say that you should be with the ayahuasca like once every 3 months or 6 months. I mean, it's something you live with, I think they say.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you just do once.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Are you excited to do it again?
I suppose I am. Yes.
Do you think that if you
Well,
bought
in my
it...
case, it's going to be a boga.
Oh, you're
do it,
going to switch
yeah.
up.
Wow.
And what's different about that? Or what will be different?
Iboga cleanses your system absolutely thoroughly.
What does that mean?
If you've got toxins in your body, which everybody has, those which are accumulate over a long period of time from the moment you're born, possibly intergenerationally, from unnatural food, cooked food, food with additives, preservatives, or you're absorbing heavy metals from the environment, the Iboga can take that out very, very fast indeed.
Wow.
And when are you going to do this?
Sometime next year.
Okay. Maybe we should go.
I read
Yeah, you should, yeah.
I read a first-hand account of someone who'd done iboga, and what it is it's a third-person observation of your psyche, or that's one of the experiences, and
As in you're the third person.
yeah, and you're looking at your own mind and your soul from
That's
an
right.
outside vantage point, and he said
The ego is suspended, and you have a holiday from yourself, and you experience something like the perfect freedom. But with that freedom, you enjoy and you gain knowledge.
That's
And
interesting.
you don't use it to consume experiences or anything like that.
So the thing he was saying that terrified me is he was delving into these deep memories and the formative aspects of his psyche, and the thing that stuck with him, or that made the biggest impression on him, was how much of it was made up of advertising from his childhood, and it was then and there that he realized how invasive all this
Yeah.
corporate stuff that we see and have like beamed into us 24 hours a day from the moment we were born. Like, think of kids, like how much TV did you watch as a kid? I know I watched a hell of a lot.
Yeah, nonsense information.
Yeah, and it's all there sitting right inside.
Of course, it
Yeah,
is. A diamond lasts forever.
Yeah.
All the pictures of the models.
Yeah.
All the guy with the new car and the...
And Scooby-Doo.
And,
Scooby-Doo.
and think how much that, like,
And
we're
Shaggy.
all sitting here, right? And we've made certain decisions in our life that have led us down different branching paths to arrive at this point right now. Think how much of those decisions were influenced by things we watched on TV, or a picture we saw on a bus, or a radio advert. There's no doubt about it. A lot of it
No
was.
doubt.
Right?
And you think you're doing it your way.
Yeah.
And you're the pioneer. When in, I guess, a lot of that.
Yes, the delusion of free will.
Yeah.
It is delusion. You said you felt really empty afterwards for a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's a positive empty though.
It was. See,
Yeah.
I when you guys talk about this, when Nick's brought ayahuasca up a couple times, it fucking terrifies me. And I don't know why I should be scared of myself, because that's what it is. But I just hear of some of these trips where these guys, like, snakes coming inside their body, eating everything inside. They're confronting all of their fears, speaking with their parents that they haven't talked to in years. I don't know. For me, it just seems really scary.
Yeah, but go to
Sounds
where the
like
fear
you'd
is,
benefit.
Right? Yeah. go to where the fear is, bro.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you experience any of that?
No, I think there's something wrong with my brain. I can remember absolutely everything, particularly from an early age. So I didn't really need to re-experience any of that because I hadn't really repressed or forgotten anything. Well, as far as I know, maybe I have repressed things and I don't know what I don't know and all of that. So I was quite open to it. So when information came to me, I saw things differently. I was a little bit sad and all that sort of thing. And
But not massive amounts of emotional pain.
no, not at all. In fact, it was a release. In fact, it was quite novel feeling sad for a few days rather than feeling blank or empty.
Okay, so you felt
So
sad
I
for a
quite
few
enjoyed
days.
that, yeah.
So you did feel sad
Yeah,
for a few
yeah.
days. Okay, but it wasn't.
It was probably necessary for me to feel sad if I'd blocked that feeling earlier on.
Yeah,
Yeah, emotions like sadness. This is something that became clear to me. Is emotions like sadness and anger. Like the first thing we do now in our modern society is we medicate those away. But
Yeah.
there's
Or
a
we
reason for
repress
them,
them.
right? Yeah, or we repress them. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't want to be angry. Stop being angry. Why am I sad today? What's wrong with me? I'm not supposed to be sad.
Yeah.
I go
Well,
through
yeah. I mean, they're getting better at medicating feelings away. Like I've been reading lately that they're experimenting on beta blockers. They initially gave them to soldiers in the Iraq War, and when they were given after a traumatic event to soldiers, they didn't suffer post-traumatic stress disorder. So the beta blockers effectively blocked the formation of traumatic memories.
That's incredible.
And then some psychiatrists in Holland experimented on people who'd suffered from traumas, recreated the traumas in those people through hypnosis, then applied the beta blockers. Then they found they could actually wipe these memories out, in effect.
Wow.
And they're beginning to understand the biochemical basis of this. It would appear that memories have to be formed along with an emotion. So if you split the link between the two of them, they cannot actually be
That is
recreated.
fascinating.
Well,
Yeah.
it's actually led to a lot of belligerence from conservative type commentators saying that this is morally wrong. And
Yeah.
people do not have a right to this. This will probably be a
interesting.
subject of cultural wars in the near future.
I saw something similar to this where they had two mice, and then they were trying to show this mice was drowning in water where the platform was, and they found if they injected him with a little bit of adrenaline when he got that information, then he remembered it,
Yeah.
and if he didn't, then he wouldn't.
Yeah. It's
It must be something
I've
there.
heard of a similar experiment where they took a leech and they got it to go through this maze to
A leech?
A leech, yeah. They
Why
got
do they
this,
use a leech?
I don't know why do they use mice. So they got the leech to go through this maze to this little bit of blood. And then what they did was they did this with a bunch of different leeches and saw how long it took on average for the leech to get there. Then they liquidized the leeches that had already done it and fed them to a new leech, and it went through the maze a lot more quickly than all the previous ones. So the whole
see.
theory was something to do with cellular memory and how that was transferred through the.
That's
I
crazy.
thought that was interesting. Yeah.
I haven't heard about these beta blockers.
No?
No.
No, I should go online, look at it. There's a whole debate that's beginning to rage about this one. A lot of political philosophy and moral philosophy is being aimed precisely at this. There are some people saying that it won't make you human if you don't have a traumatic memory, i.e. the meaning of being human is to suffer. I suspect the same Calvinistic morality we've been discussing earlier has been behind this.
There's like a fine line because they say without all the suffering you won't grow as a person, but if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, you come where you can't function as a person.
You can't function, you shrink as a person.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a point where that which does not kill me doesn't make you stronger.
What this comes down to is there are some people in the world who see intrinsic value in the suffering of others. It actually makes them feel better. So when something from science comes along, and it's often people who hate science, like religious people who say this, which can alleviate that, they become very, very upset, agitated and angry, and they seek to produce any form of distortion, fabrication or fairy story, e.g. it goes against what it means to be human, or even worse, it's against human dignity.
This is something that alleviates suffering,
Yeah.
and they're against that.
Well, that's what they're effectively saying. Yeah. So it is human to learn from your mistakes and learn from society's mistakes. And to do that, there must be pain and there must be trauma. If these things were taken away and everybody was happy all the time and didn't live such traumatic lives, then things would be different in a bad way. And what they actually fear is people enjoying a form of freedom, which they interpret as a hedonism or license. And it's probably something which they themselves have always been programmed to fear. Mm-hmm. So you will often find it's religious people or people who are, shall we say, conservative. And by the way, I mean conservative with a capital C, not members of the Conservative Party. People who are ideological conservatives, who fetishize the idea of individuality and choice, who fetishize the idea of the freedom of the individual, who will be against that. Because what this sort of medication would demonstrate is there's no such thing as a choice. It's all to do with your random experience and the way your brain has wired itself. Anything that takes away that undermines one of their foundations of their belief. Also, it undermines a lot of their self-satisfaction, and it also takes away their ability to have power over others, to lecture them, make them suffer, and to some extent, and I'm out on a limb here, enjoy the suffering of others.
Wow, that's an interesting theory.
That is very interesting.
Why do you think there are elements of the Republican Party that hate this?
What do I think?
Why do you think that? George W. Bush set up his presidential council on bioethics with some awful person called Leon Cass in charge of it. He was aware of these therapies, and he was lobbying very, very hard for not only no federal funding for such research, and he succeeded in that, but he also lobbied very, very hard for no private funding into such research, and actually looking for a worldwide ban. And so it wasn't just abortion on bioengineering and all these sort of mainstays of the cultural war, which you've probably heard all about, people have been bored to death on the subject. It's this. And that is a fundamental about what it is to be human, which they are fighting over, which is why I believe in the future there will be very belligerent cultural wars.
Because that's the religious right as well in the U.S. It's very powerful.
It is, but it's not just the religious right or religious people.
It's just the right.
There are actually humanists who take this view as well.
That's interesting.
Guys, I hate to say it, but we're basically pushing our hour here.
Powerful.
I think we might need to have some supplemental episodes in the future, and do an extra half hour or something with people that want to keep listening.
You know what, Daniel? That was every now and then you meet someone who just expands your view of the world. That was definitely. That hour was that for me.
People often say that to me, and then they say, "You talk a whole load of shit."
Well, I hope they'll be happy about it. I'm just gonna.
I certainly hope so.
I'm going to drop our sponsor in here just at the end because we didn't mention him, but we all have some Alpha Brain today. It's a nootropic. I'm going to give Daniel some to take with him so he can tell me what he thinks of it. But if you guys want to check it out, it's on onit.com. That's ONNIT. Actually, the CEO, who you've had some chats with on email, Aubrey Marcus, he changed his name after he went to the Amazon and tried ayahuasca and came back and was a completely different person. And then he made this company, onit.com, and now he is selling nootropics. Really? So this stuff was actually inspired. I wonder if
he's going to bring out a beta blocker soon. Huh?
Maybe he will.
Well, that would be beta consciousness.
Yeah.
And they're selling a few other products. One's called New Mood, and then they have something called Shroom Tech.
I haven't tried New Mood. What's it like?
It's it's got L-tryptophan in it, and I think it tries to synthesize serotonin in different ways in a natural form in your brain.
Man, I'm going to pop a couple of these.
Yeah, take a couple of those. We're also going to ship in something called Shroom Tech, which is something it's called Shroom Tech. I think the Chinese Olympic team started using it. It's this special mushroom that grows up in Nepal.
Is it the cordyceps?
Yes, the cordyceps mushroom.
I was given that by an acupuncturist. They give you a lot more energy.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ship some of that in, and I'm going to try it. There's one for immune system, and there's one for like heavy training, which I know Joe Rogan said he likes it for a jiu-jitsu session. So, anyways, more nootropics to come, and I think we get Daniel back on in 2012.
For sure.
Maybe right before the world's going to end.
Maybe right after the Bogain session.
That might be good. Or maybe 2 weeks after. Maybe we do it before and after.
Maybe you could just come do it on the show.
That'd be awesome.
Maybe I will, yeah. All right, go on then. That's a challenge. Yeah,
all right, I like that.
Let's do it.
All right.
I'm just kidding, but sure. Yeah.
That's cool. Daniel, thanks for coming on.
Yep, you're welcome.
And Nick.
Nice one. It's about the journey.
Yeah.
Indeed. Take care, guys. Bye.
Mind expanding.